Pack your things and leave, my stepmother ordered at breakfast. This property belongs to real children now. Dad agreed, you've taken advantage long enough. Stepsister laughed, finally getting what I deserve. I dropped the house keys and walked out. The next day, when the bank called about the $950,000 deed transfer, their relief turned to terror. None of them knew. It was a Tuesday morning in March, and I had planned to spend the day working on some freelance graphic design projects from home. At 26, I had been living in my childhood home for the past 3 years, helping with expenses and taking care of the property while my father traveled frequently for his consulting work. My stepmother Sharon entered the kitchen with her usual theatrical flair, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite it being barely 7 in the morning. Behind her trailed my stepsister Brittany, a 25-year-old who had moved back in with her mother 6 months ago after her latest relationship fell apart. Brittany had always carried herself with an air of entitlement that made family gatherings uncomfortable, but lately, it had gotten worse. "Aaron," Sharon announced, her voice sharp and commanding, "we need to talk." I looked up from my phone, immediately sensing the tension in the room. My father, Paul, stood near the kitchen island, avoiding eye contact with me. This wasn't a good sign. "What's going on?" I asked, setting down my coffee mug. Sharon crossed her arms and lifted her chin. "Pack your things and leave. This property belongs to real children now." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at her, certain I had misheard. "Excuse me?" "You heard me correctly," Sharon continued, her voice growing more confident. "You're 26 years old, Aaron. It's time you learned to stand on your own 2 feet instead of freeloading off your father." I turned to my dad, expecting him to intervene, to tell Sharon she was out of line. Instead, he nodded slowly and said, "Sharon's right, sweetheart. You've taken advantage long enough. It's time for you to move out and make your own way." The betrayal was stunning. This was the man who had raised me alone for 12 years after my mother died in a car accident when I was 10. The man who had taught me to ride a bike, helped me with homework, and walked me down the aisle at my college graduation. Now he was standing there, agreeing that I should be kicked out of my childhood home. Brittany, who had been quiet until now, let out a laugh that sounded more like a cackle. "Finally. I'm getting what I deserve. This house should have been mine from the beginning." I felt my hands start to shake. "Dad, what is she talking about? This is our family home. Mom and you bought this house together when I was 5. Paul shifted uncomfortably. "Things change, Aaron. Sharon and Brittany are my family now, and they need the space. Brittany wants to start fresh, maybe begin her own business, and she needs a stable place to do that. I've been contributing to the mortgage and utilities for 3 years, I said, my voice rising. I've maintained the garden, handled repairs, and taken care of this place while you were traveling. Plus, my graphic design business has been doing well. I've been paying Paul at rate for my room and contributing to household expenses. How is that taking advantage?" Sharon waved her hand dismissively. "Those were token contributions. The real expenses of maintaining a property like this are far beyond what you've provided. Besides, Brittany has plans for this house that will actually increase its value." "What plans?" I demanded. Brittany smirked. "I'm going to convert the basement into a rental unit and turn your old room into a home office for my online boutique. The extra income will help Dad and Sharon with their retirement planning." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These people were talking about renovating my childhood home, erasing every trace of my life there, as if I had never existed. "You can't just kick me out," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I realized they probably could. I had been living there as an adult child, not a tenant with legal rights. "Actually, we can," Sharon said with obvious satisfaction. "This is our home, and we're giving you notice. You have until the end of the week to find somewhere else to live." I looked around the kitchen, taking in the familiar details that had been part of my life for over 2 decades. The small chip in the tile backsplash from when I had accidentally dropped a plate while helping with dishes as a teenager. The height pawls on the doorframe where my mother had measured my growth each year until she died. The window herb garden that I had planted and maintained for the past 5 years. "Fine," I said quietly, reaching into my pocket and pulling out the house keys. I had 3 keys on the ring, the front door, back door, and a spare that I kept for emergencies. I set them down on the kitchen counter with a soft clink. "I'll be out by Friday." Sharon's expression shifted to one of surprise, as if she had expected more of a fight. Brittany looked almost disappointed that the confrontation had ended so quickly. My father finally met my eyes. "Aaron, you have to understand." "No, Dad," I interrupted. "I understand perfectly." I walked out of the kitchen, went upstairs to my room, and began the process of packing up 28 years of my life. It was surreal, going through belongings that I had accumulated over the decades, deciding what was worth taking and what I could leave behind. Photo albums from high school, books I had loved as a child, clothes that no longer fit but held sentimental value. By Thursday evening, I had loaded everything I cared about into my Honda Civic and a small U-Haul trailer. I had found a furnished studio apartment across town that I could rent month to month while I figured out my next steps. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Friday morning came, and I did one final walkthrough of the house. In my old bedroom, I stood looking out the window at the oak tree my mother and I had planted together when I was 7. She had told me that someday it would be tall enough for me to climb, and that I should think of her whenever I saw it. The tree was now over 20 feet tall, its branches reaching toward the second-story window. I grabbed the last box from my closet and headed downstairs. Sharon, Brittany, and my father were waiting in the living room, presumably to make sure I actually left. "All done," I announced, setting the box by the front door. "Good," Sharon said, though there was something in her voice that sounded less triumphant than I had expected. Brittany was already on her phone, probably texting friends about her good fortune. My father approached me hesitantly. "Aaron, I want you to know that this isn't easy for me. But sometimes we have to make difficult decisions for the good of the family." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without breaking down. "I'll call you next week," he added. "We can have dinner, talk about how you're settling in." "Sure, Dad," I replied, though we both knew that call would probably never come. I picked up my final box and walked out the front door without looking back. The studio apartment was depressing, but it was temporary. I spent the weekend organizing my belongings and trying to process what had happened. I had always known that Sharon resented me, saw me as a reminder of my father's previous life, but I had never imagined she would go this far. And Brittany's entitlement was astounding, but not entirely surprising given how her mother had raised her. What hurt the most was my father's betrayal. This was the man who had held me when I cried about bullies at school, who had stayed up late helping me with my college applications, who had told me countless times that family was the most important thing in the world. Now he had chosen his new family over me without a second thought. Friday morning brought an unexpected phone call. I was sitting at my small kitchen table, drinking coffee and trying to focus on a logo design project, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize with a local area code. "Hello? Is this Aaron Wallace?" "Yes, this is Aaron. This is Kyle Denton from First National Bank. I'm calling regarding some concerning activity on the property at 1247 Elm Street. We've received documentation claiming to transfer ownership of this property, but there are some serious irregularities that we need to discuss with you immediately." My heart started racing. "I'm sorry, what kind of irregularities?" "Ma'am, someone has attempted to initiate a sale of the property at 1247 Elm Street using forged documentation. The signatures don't match our records, and the notarization appears to be fraudulent. However, our system shows you as the actual owner of this property. We need you to come in immediately to verify your identity and discuss potential fraud charges." I was completely confused. "Mr. Patterson, I didn't attempt to sell any property. I don't even own that property, or at least, I didn't think I did." "Ma'am, according to the county records, you are indeed the sole owner of the property at 1247 Elm Street. The deed has been in your name since 2020. The attempted fraudulent sale was for $950,000, and the supposed buyer is listed as Sharon Wallace. Do you know this person?" That was the year my father had gone through his health scare. He had been diagnosed with what doctors initially thought might be pancreatic cancer, though it turned out to be a benign tumor. During that time, he had spent weeks getting his affairs in order, updating his will, and making sure everything was properly documented in case the worst happened. "Mr. Patterson," I said slowly, "can you tell me exactly what this fraud attempt involved?" "Someone claiming to be you attempted to sell the property to Sharon Wallace for $950,000. They provided what appeared to be your identification and signature, but when we ran our standard verification checks, multiple red flags appeared. The signature didn't match our records, the ID number was incorrect, and the notary stamp was from a notary whose license expired 2 years ago." My mind was racing. "And Sharon Wallace was the supposed buyer?" "Yes. She's been calling our office repeatedly since Friday, claiming there's been some mistake and demanding that we process the sale immediately. When we told her about the fraud investigation, she became very agitated and hung up. After hanging up with the bank, I immediately called my father's attorney, Victor Hale. Fortunately, since my graphic design business had been successful over the past 2 years, I had built up enough savings to afford proper legal representation when needed. Mr. Hale had handled my parents' wills and estate planning for over 15 years, and I knew he would have the answers I needed. "Aaron." Mr. Hale sounded pleased to hear from me. "How are you doing? I haven't seen you since your father's scare a few years back." "Mr. Hale, I need to ask you about something urgent. Did my father transfer ownership of the house on Elm Street to me in 2020? There was a brief pause. "Yes, he did. It was part of his estate planning when he thought he might be seriously ill. He wanted to make sure the property stayed in the family, particularly with you, since it was your childhood home and held so much sentimental value. But he never told me about it. That was his choice, Mr. Hale explained. He said he didn't want you to feel burdened by the responsibility while he was still living there and maintaining the property. His plan was to tell you eventually, probably when he was ready to downsize or if something happened to him. I felt like I was in a dream. So I actually own the house? You are the sole legal owner, yes. Your father has been living there as your guest, essentially, though I'm sure he didn't think of it that way. Mr. Hale, Sharon just attempted to sell my house using fraudulent documents. The bank caught it, but I need to know what my options are. The attorney's voice became serious. That's identity theft and fraud, both serious crimes. Do you want me to contact the police and the district attorney's office? Not yet, I said. Let me think about this. After ending the call with Mr. Hale, I sat in my tiny studio apartment, staring at the wall and trying to process this information. My father had given me the house during his health scare, but had never told me about it. Sharon and Brittany had kicked me out of my own property. And now Sharon was trying to sell my house without my knowledge or consent. The betrayal felt even deeper now. My father hadn't just allowed me to be thrown out of the family home, he had allowed me to be thrown out of my home. A home that he had specifically transferred to me to keep it in the family. I needed to understand why he had done this. More importantly, I needed to decide what to do about it. That evening, I drove past the house on Elm Street. The lights were on in the living room, and I could see Brittany through the window, talking animatedly on her phone. She had probably already started making plans for her basement renovation and home office. My phone buzzed with a text message from my father. How are you settling in? Want to get dinner this weekend? I stared at the message for a long time before responding, Sure, Dad. We definitely need to talk. We met at Romano's, the Italian restaurant where we had celebrated every one of my birthdays since I was 12. My father looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with his napkin and avoiding eye contact. You look good, he said as we sat down. The new place working out okay? It's fine, I replied. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. He nodded, though his expression became wary. Why didn't you tell me that you transferred the house to me in 2019? The color drained from my father's face. He set down his water glass and looked at me with something that might have been panic. How did you find out about that? The bank called. Sharon is trying to sell my house. My father closed his eyes and rubbed his forehead. Aaron, it's complicated. Then explain it to me. He was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. When I thought I might be dying, I wanted to make sure you were protected. The house was the most valuable thing I owned, and I knew Sharon would contest the will if something happened to me. So I transferred it to you in 2020, right after my diagnosis. But then you got better. Yes, but by then, Sharon and I were already married, and I didn't know how to tell her what I had done. She had ideas about the house, plans for Brittany, and I knew she would be furious if she found out I had already given it away. So you decided to just pretend it never happened? I thought I could handle it gradually, maybe transfer it back to myself eventually, or work out some kind of arrangement. But then Sharon started pushing for Brittany to move in, and things got complicated. I felt a mixture of anger and sadness. Dad, you let them throw me out of my own house. And now Sharon has committed identity theft and fraud trying to steal my property. I panicked, he admitted. Sharon was getting suspicious about why I was so reluctant to ask you to leave. She started questioning whether I was hiding something from her. I thought if I went along with it, I could figure out a solution later. A solution that involved Sharon forging my signature and trying to sell my house? My father's face went pale. She told me she had legal advice saying the transfer could be challenged. I didn't know she was planning to forge documents. And you believe that? I wanted to believe it, he said quietly. It seemed like a way for everyone to get what they wanted. I stared at my father across the table, seeing a man I barely recognized. The strong, principled person who had raised me had been replaced by someone who was willing to lie and steal to avoid an uncomfortable conversation with his wife. What happens now? He asked. Now you're going to call Sharon and tell her the sale is off. You're going to explain that the house belongs to me, and that she and Brittany need to find somewhere else to live. Aaron, I can't do that. Sharon will leave me. Maybe she should. My father flinched as if I had slapped him. You don't understand. I love her. Do you love her more than you love me? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. The next morning, I went to the bank and provided them with my identification to verify that I had not authorized any sale of the property. Mr. Patterson walked me through the attempted fraud, showing me copies of the forged documents. The signature was a poor imitation of mine, and Sharon had clearly been sloppy in her planning. "We'll be filing a report with the police," Mr. Patterson informed me. "This level of fraud is a felony." I also contacted Mr. Hale and asked him to send a formal notice to Sharon, informing her that any further attempts to claim ownership of or sell the property would result in additional criminal charges. Then I called my father. "Dad, I'm giving you and Sharon 30 days to find alternative housing. After that, I'll be moving back into my house. Aaron, please, can't we work something out? Maybe you could sell the house and split the proceeds with Brittany. She really needs the money to start her business. Brittany can start her business somewhere else. But where will Sharon and I go? We can't afford to buy another house in this Paulette. You should have thought about that before you decided to steal from your daughter." There was a long pause. I never meant for it to be stealing. What would you call it? Another pause. I don't know. I'll tell you what it is, Dad. It's betrayal. You betrayed me in the worst possible way, and you did it to please a woman who has never cared about anyone but herself and her daughter. Sharon cares about me. Does she? Or does she care about what you can provide for her? I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, but he didn't respond. 30 days, Dad. After that, I'm changing the locks. Over the next few weeks, I heard through mutual friends that chaos had erupted at the house on Elm Street. Sharon had been beside herself when she received the cease and desist letter, screaming at my father and demanding to know how he could have hidden something so important from her. Brittany had been equally furious, ranting on social media about how she had been robbed of her inheritance by a manipulative stepsister. The first week after our dinner conversation was relatively quiet. I focused on my work, taking on extra projects to keep myself busy and to build up my savings account. Living in the studio apartment was depressing, but it motivated me to resolve the situation quickly. Then Sharon started calling. The first call came on a Wednesday evening while I was working on a logo design for a local bakery. I saw her name on my caller ID and almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Aaron, we need to talk," Sharon said without any preamble. "I don't think we do. Listen to me, you selfish little brat. I don't know what kind of manipulation you pulled with your father, but you're not going to destroy my marriage over some technicality." "A technicality?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Sharon, I legally own the house. You tried to commit fraud by selling property that doesn't belong to you. Your father gave you that house when he thought he was dying. He's not dying now, so obviously he should get it back. That's not how property ownership works. It's how family works." Sharon's voice was getting shrill. "Real family members don't steal from each other." "You're absolutely right," I said. "Real family members don't steal from each other. They also don't kick each other out of their homes without warning." Sharon hung up on me. The calls continued for several days. Sometimes it was Sharon, sometimes it was Brittany, and occasionally it was my father trying to mediate. Brittany's calls were particularly nasty, filled with accusations and threats that bordered on harassment. "You think you're so smart," Brittany spat during one particularly venomous call. "But you're just a pathetic loser who can't make it on her own. That's why you're clinging to Daddy's house like a security blanket." "Brittany, if I'm such a pathetic loser, why are you so desperate to get my house? It's not your house. It should have been mine from the beginning. My mom married your dad, which makes me his daughter too. I have just as much right to that property as you do. Actually, you have no rights to that property. You're not related to me or my father by blood, and you're not mentioned in any legal documents." "We'll see about that," Brittany said before hanging up. The next day, I received a call from Mr. Hale, my father's attorney. "Aaron, I need to inform you that Sharon Wallace has contacted my office. She's demanding that I reverse the property transfer from 2019. Can she do that? Absolutely not. She has no legal standing whatsoever. But she's threatening to sue both you and your father for what she's calling conspiracy to defraud her of marital assets." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Is that a real legal threat?" "It's nonsense," Mr. Hale assured me. "The property was transferred to you before your father married Sharon. She has no claim to it whatsoever. But frivolous lawsuits can still be expensive and time-consuming to defend against. What do you recommend?" "I recommend that you document everything. Save all voicemails, text messages, and emails from Sharon and Brittany. If they're harassing you, we may need to seek a restraining order." After hanging up with Mr. Hale, I realized that Sharon and Brittany weren't going to go quietly. They were going to fight this with everything they had, regardless of the legal reality. That evening, I decided to drive past the house again. It had become a habit, a way of reminding myself what I was fighting for. As I turned onto Elm Street, I noticed several cars parked in front of the house that I didn't recognize. Through the living room window, I could see a group of people gathered around the dining room table. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Can you call me? It's important. I pulled over and called him back. Aaron, Sharon has called a family meeting. She's invited her sisters and some of Brittany's friends over to discuss the situation. What kind of discussion are we talking about? I think they're trying to figure out a way to contest the property transfer. Sharon's sister Elaine apparently knows someone who works in real estate law. I felt my stomach tighten. Dad, you need to shut this down. This is getting out of hand. I've tried, but Sharon won't listen to me. She says I betrayed her trust, and that she has every right to explore her legal options. Her legal options don't exist. She has no claim to my property. I know that, and you know that, but Sharon is convinced that there's some loophole or technicality that will work in her favor. What exactly did you tell her about the transfer? My father was quiet for a moment. I told her the truth. That I transferred the house to you during my health scare as part of estate planning. And what was her response? She said that since we're married, any major financial decisions should have been made jointly. She thinks the transfer is invalid because she wasn't consulted. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dad, you transferred the house to me before you even met Sharon. How could she possibly have been consulted on a decision that happened years before you married her? I tried to explain that, but she's not being rational about this. No, she's not being rational. She's being greedy. The family meeting at the house apparently went late into the night. I know this because Brittany posted several cryptic messages on social media about fighting for what's right and not letting bullies win. She also posted a photo of herself and Sharon with several other women, all of them looking determined and slightly vindictive. The next morning, I received a certified letter from a law firm I had never heard of. Inside was a formal demand letter, claiming that the property transfer from my father to me was invalid due to failure to disclose material information to affected parties and demanding that I immediately cease and desist from any claims of ownership regarding the property on Elm Street. I immediately forwarded the letter to Mr. Hale, who called me back within an hour. This is amateur hour, he said, and I could hear the amusement in his voice. The law firm that sent this letter specializes in personal injury cases. They have no expertise in property law whatsoever. So I don't need to worry about it? Not legally, no. But it does show that Sharon is serious about fighting this, even if she doesn't understand what she's fighting. What should I do? I'll send a response letter explaining why their demands are baseless. But Aaron, I think you should also consider your personal safety. When people feel cornered and desperate, they sometimes do irrational things. Mr. Hale's warning turned out to be prescient. That weekend, while I was grocery shopping, someone broke into my studio apartment. Nothing was stolen, but the place had been thoroughly searched. Drawers were pulled out, papers were scattered, and my laptop had been moved from my desk to the kitchen table. I called the police, but there wasn't much they could do. There were no signs of forced entry, which meant whoever had done it either had a key or was skilled at picking locks. The investigating officer suggested that I change my locks and consider installing a security system. I had no proof that Sharon or Brittany were responsible for the break-in, but the timing was suspicious. I decided to take Mr. Hale's advice about documenting everything, so I took photos of my ransacked apartment and filed a police report. The harassment escalated over the following week. I started receiving anonymous calls at all hours of the day and night. Sometimes the caller would hang up immediately, sometimes they would play loud music or make random noises. Once, someone whispered, "You don't deserve that house," before hanging up. I also noticed that someone had been following me. On Tuesday, I spotted the same blue sedan behind me on my way to the grocery store and again when I was driving to a client meeting. On Thursday, the same car was parked across the street from my apartment building when I got home from work. I was starting to feel genuinely concerned for my safety, but I was also getting angry. Sharon and Brittany were trying to intimidate me into giving up my legal rights to my own property, and I wasn't going to let them succeed. I documented everything carefully, taking photos of the car, noting license plate numbers, and keeping detailed records of the harassment. Mr. Hale had advised me that if I wanted to pursue legal action, I would need solid evidence. I called my father on Friday evening. "Dad, I need to know if Sharon or Brittany has been following me or harassing me." "What do you mean?" I told him about the break-in, the anonymous calls, and the car that seemed to be tailing me. "Aaron, I had no idea. Sharon hasn't said anything about doing anything like that." "Can you ask her?" "I'll try, but she's barely speaking to me these days. She spends most of her time whispering with Brittany or on the phone with her sisters." "Dad, this is serious. I'm starting to feel unsafe." "Maybe you should just give them the house," my father said quietly. "I know it's not fair, but if it stops all this craziness..." "Are you seriously suggesting that I let myself be bullied out of my own property?" "I'm suggesting that maybe it's not worth all this stress and conflict." "It's worth it to me." My father sighed. I don't know how to fix this, Aaron. You can start by telling your wife to stop harassing me. The weekend brought a new escalation. On Saturday morning, I discovered that someone had keyed my car while it was parked outside my apartment building. Long, deep scratches ran along both sides of the vehicle, and thief had been carved into the paint on the driver's side door. This time I was certain that Sharon or Brittany was responsible. I took photos and filed another police report, but I also decided it was time to take more aggressive action. I called Mr. Hale and asked him to prepare documentation for a police report regarding the harassment. I also asked him to send another cease and desist letter, this one warning them that the fraud attempt had been reported to authorities and that any further harassment would result in additional criminal charges. The fraud charges alone are quite serious, Mr. Hale told me. Identity theft and attempted real estate fraud are both felonies. The district attorney's office will likely want to prosecute. What does that mean for Sharon? If convicted, she could face several years in prison and substantial fines. The evidence is pretty clear-cut. The bank has all the forged documents, and there's a clear paper trail. On Monday morning, Sharon and Brittany were served with formal notices that they were under investigation for fraud and identity theft. The cease and desist letter also warned them that any further contact with me would be considered witness intimidation, which would result in additional charges. The response was swift and furious. Within hours of being served, Brittany posted a long rant on social media calling me a vindictive psychopath who was destroying an innocent family out of pure spite. She claimed that I had manipulated the legal system to steal her inheritance, and that she was being persecuted for standing up for what's right. Sharon apparently called my father in hysterics, demanding that he control his daughter and threatening to leave him if he didn't side with her completely. She also apparently admitted to him that she had tried to sell the house, but claimed she thought she had the legal right to do so as his wife. My father called me that evening, sounding exhausted and defeated. Aaron, Sharon is talking about divorce. She says she can't stay married to someone whose daughter is actively trying to destroy her life. Dad, I'm not trying to destroy anyone's life. I'm trying to protect my own property and my own safety. Sharon committed serious crimes. But did you have to involve the police? Couldn't you have just talked to them? I tried talking to them. They responded by breaking into my apartment and vandalizing my car. And then Sharon tried to steal my house using forged documents. Sharon says she thought she had the right to sell the house as my wife. Dad, that's not how property law works. You can't sell property that doesn't belong to you, even if you're married to someone who used to own it. My father was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Dad, I need you to think really carefully about what's happening here. Sharon and Brittany are trying to steal my house through fraud and intimidation. When that didn't work, they escalated to harassment and property damage. These are not the actions of innocent people who have been wronged. But Sharon says, I don't care what Sharon says. I care about what Sharon does. And what she's doing is trying to destroy me because I won't give her something that doesn't belong to her. Maybe if you offered them some kind of compromise. What kind of compromise? They want my house, Dad. The house that you gave to me. The house that legally belongs to me. What exactly should I compromise on? I don't know, my father said again, and I could hear the defeat in his voice. After hanging up with my father, I realized that I was completely on my own in this fight. My father was too weak and too conflicted to stand up to Sharon, and Sharon was too determined and too desperate to give up easily. But I also realized that I was winning. All of Sharon's schemes and harassment campaigns couldn't change the fundamental legal reality: the house was mine, and there was nothing she could do about it. The formal criminal investigation seemed to work better than any restraining order could have. The anonymous phone calls stopped, and I didn't notice anyone following me anymore. Sharon and Brittany couldn't contact me directly without risking additional charges, which meant they had to find other ways to vent their frustration. They found those ways quickly. My father called me several times, pleading for more time, but I held firm. I had already been generous by giving them 30 days to find housing. On the morning of the 31st day, I arrived at the house with a locksmith. Sharon and Brittany's cars were still in the driveway, but my father's car was gone. I had heard from a neighbor that he had been staying at a hotel for the past week, unable to handle the constant fighting at home. I knocked on the front door, and Sharon answered, looking haggard and older than I had ever seen her. "You can't do this," she said. "This is my home." "Actually, it's not," I replied. "It's my home, and you're trespassing." Brittany appeared behind her mother, her face red with anger. "You're destroying our family." "No," I said calmly. "You destroyed our family when you decided that I didn't deserve to be treated with basic respect and decency." The locksmith had finished changing the locks, and I paid him and thanked him for his work. Sharon and Brittany stood on the front porch with several suitcases, looking lost and desperate. "Where are we supposed to go?" Sharon asked. "I don't know," I replied honestly. But it's not my problem to solve. Your father will never forgive you for this. My father made his choice when he decided to steal from me. Now he has to live with the consequences. I walked into my house and closed the door behind me. For the first time in months, I was home. The house felt different now, but it was still home. I spent the first few days just walking through the rooms, reacquainting myself with the space that held so many memories. I found some of my childhood belongings that Sharon and Brittany had boxed up, presumably to make room for Brittany's things. I unpacked them carefully, returning them to their proper places. In my old bedroom, I stood at the window looking out at the oak tree my mother and I had planted. It was early spring, and new buds were beginning to appear on the branches. I thought about what my mother would have thought of everything that had happened. She had always been a fierce protector of family, but she also had no patience for people who took advantage of others' kindness. My father called that evening. "Aaron, I need you to reconsider. Sharon is talking about divorce and Brittany has nowhere to go." "Where are you staying?" I asked. "I found a small apartment across town. It's temporary, just until I can figure things out." "Maybe it doesn't have to be temporary." "What do you mean?" "Maybe this is your chance to start over, to figure out what you really want instead of just going along with what Sharon wants." "I want my family back together." "Which family? The one where you have a daughter who loves and respects you, or the one where you're manipulated into stealing from that daughter?" He was quiet for a long time. "I don't know how to fix this." "You could start by apologizing." "I'm sorry, Aaron. I'm so sorry for everything." "I know you are, Dad. But being sorry isn't enough. You have to decide who you want to be." 6 months later, my father and Sharon's divorce was finalized. He moved into a small house about 20 minutes away, and we began the slow process of rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't easy, there was a lot of hurt and broken trust to work through, but we were making progress. Sharon and Brittany moved to another state, where Sharon's sister lived. I heard through the grapevine that Brittany's online boutique had never gotten off the ground, and that she was working at a department store while living with her aunt. As for me, I was happier than I had been in years. I had converted one of the upstairs bedrooms into a home office for my graphic design business, which was thriving. I had also started dating someone, a kind, honest man who couldn't believe anyone would treat their own daughter the way I had been treated. The house on Elm Street was truly mine now, in every sense of the word. I had made it my own while still honoring the memories it held. The oak tree in the backyard continued to grow, its branches now strong enough to support a swing, which I had installed in memory of my mother. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I had never found out about the deed transfer, if Sharon had succeeded in selling the house out from under me. But then I remembered that the truth has a way of coming to light, and that sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the most important revelations about who people really are. I had learned that my father was weaker than I had thought, but also that he was capable of change and growth. I had learned that Sharon and Brittany were exactly who I had always suspected they were: selfish, entitled people who saw others as obstacles to their own desires. Most importantly, I had learned that I was stronger than I had ever imagined, and that I didn't need anyone's approval to stand up for myself and demand the respect I deserved. The house was quiet now, peaceful in a way it hadn't been in years. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged.